Shalom guys, welcome back. I just want to talk about the Torah portion Shemini. And last week I uploaded the video. We talked about Aaron's sons and the inauguration of the tabernacle, inauguration of the priesthood. And so how Aaron's sons profane the tabernacle. And then from there, we see that it transitions to chapter 11 with the unclean and clean animals. And it tells us for the first time what animals are to be eaten by the people or by the people of Israel and that are prescribed by Elohim. And so one of the interesting things that I was reading in the book of Jacob Milgram for Leviticus, a commentary, he establishes that the animals themselves and creation have a covenant with God. Right? When you go to Genesis 9, you see in Noah that he makes a covenant with Noah and his family and humanity, but also he makes a covenant with the animals, and the animals are a property of Elohim. Right? Elohim created these animals, created creation. And so when was the moment that humanity decided to eat animals? Right? And so we have to go back to Genesis, and where Adam and Eve, right, they sinned, they disobey God or God's order in the garden, they eat from the tree. And so Adam is cursed with whatever he sows into the ground, he won't have fruit from it, right? And so eventually they have to resort to what they can eat from what is in creation, which is animals, right? And so they were called to eat from the seeds from the tree, but now they have to eat animals, and they have to basically offer sacrifices and dedicate them to God, because these animals belong to God. These are creations of Elohim. And so we have understood that in the sacrificial system, the blood represents life. To understand that is a whole nother video. But in reality, in the sacrificial system for the tabernacle and the temple, blood represents life. And so you cannot eat or drink blood because you're not responsible. You cannot take from what is God. So the blood represents life, or life is God's. So the life of that animal is not yours. You eat the meat as a representation of the provision that God has given you, or the need of nourishing your body, but you cannot take the life of the animal, or you cannot inherit the life of the animal, which is the blood. So in Israel, every animal that was sacrificed and offered to the temple, it had to be offered to the temple. You cannot eat anything inside the city gates or the tabernacle presents without offering it to Elohim, because at the end of the day, the blood, you cannot manipulate it. And if you had a sacrifice or a meal offering, or if you had any animal that you were going to eat outside the camp or outside of Jerusalem, the blood, you had to spill it on the ground and then bury it, because the blood again represents the life. He says here, Jacob Milgram is a very good commentary. Rico recommended it to me. He says here, in the animal kingdom, it classifies in terms of what is permitted as human food. Animals like humans possess nefesh, which is a soul. Hence, their blood must be buried. Animals are responsible under law. If they kill a human being, they must die. Their meat may not be eaten, nor their carcasses sold. So this is established in Exodus 21, verse 28. And so even the animals are subjected to the Torah, which is interesting because creation is supposed to hold itself to God's order, and it's supposed to hold itself to what Elohim and God has commanded. And so it's not just the people that are called to do this. Now, there's a lot of controversy on today's time what you can eat, what you should eat, right? Many people have a simple but very complex argument with eating pork or eating shrimp. And so at the end of the day, in today's time, in our time, it's very hard for humanity to understand that if you believe in the Bible itself, right? Because at the end of the day, the scope that you have to pay attention to as a believer in the Bible is what the Bible says. You have to hold yourself to what the Bible establishes and what the Bible orders from God himself, right? And so the only place in the Bible where God says this is what you can eat and can't eat is Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14. And so if you read the Bible, if you're a believer in the Bible, you have to understand that every protagonist in this Bible, whether it was Jesus, Moses, whether it was David, Solomon, whether it was John, Paul, Peter, Matthew, all of these men that were represented, that represented Elohim, represented God, they held themselves to these Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14 statutes and Torah. A lot of what this Torah portion or this portion speaks of is of tameh and sechetz, right? So abomination or unclean. And so what these animals do is that they make you unclean unto Elohim. And you cannot approach God after eating these animals or inheriting these animals. And if you eat these animals, there is certain sacrifice or rituals that you have to do. Understand the purpose and the sole purpose of the dietary laws is to establish what Israel can eat and can't eat, and what is making the people holy and unholy into Elohim. And so the whole purpose of the Bible is to approach God. So if you want to approach God, if you want a relationship with God, you have to know what He likes and what He doesn't like in your body. As we have been talking about in many other videos, we call ourselves the temple. So if we are a temple of God, if you are a temple of the God of the Bible, you have to understand that you have to keep your body according to what your God says. And Leviticus 11 tells you what your temple can't and can't have when it comes to dietary laws. And many people might resort to Acts 10, and where it says, don't call what I call clean unclean. Now, that has a context. We're talking about Cornelius. Cornelius was a Roman centurion that had turned himself to God and had basically been giving to the needy, was helping the community and believe in the God of Israel. And Peter in the moment didn't understand that Elohim had chosen Cornelius to be part of the kingdom. And the only reason why Peter can understand this is because the system, the caste system that was built to understand that Cornelius was an impure man, because he wasn't a Torah man, he wasn't a Jewish man, he wasn't a religious believer or a practitioner. Then he was unclean and was unapproachable by Peter. But Elohim tells Peter that Cornelius is not impure because his heart has turned to God and he has decided to obey God in everything that he could, because he was a centurion for a Roman legion. So to understand what unclean and unclean is basically what is keeping you from having a direct relationship with God, right? Chapter 11 and chapter 14 start by letting you know what is purity and what is going to keep you either next to God or close to God or away from Elohim. And it starts from what we take into our body as food. So chapter 11 then closes out with the following verses. Verse 44 says, "For I am the Lord your Elohim. Consecrate yourself therefore and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not defile yourself with any swarming thing that crawls on the ground. For I am the Lord who brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. This is the law about the beast and the bird and every living creature that moves through the waters and every creature that swims on the ground, to make a distinction between the unclean and clean, and between the living creature that may be eaten and the living creature that might not be eaten." Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14 for believers in the Bible is the structure of what God calls clean and unclean for us to eat and put into our body. You can't use Acts 10 to justify eating whatever you want. Acts 10 has a context. Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14 let you know what God in the Bible structures and instructs to his people, those of Israel and those that believe in Yeshua, our Messiah, Jesus Christ. Saved by grace, we're called to eat and maintain ourselves clean and pure for his coming. So make sure you read up Leviticus 11, Deuteronomy 14, and I'll see you next week. Shabbat Tov. Ooh, I'm getting good at this. Sorry, I should have been close. Hey guys, I forgot to tell you. Subscribe if you have any questions, comments, concerns. Put them in the comment section down below. And if you want to hear from people that really know what they're talking about, you can check out Casa de Israel. It is in Spanish, or you can go to either Wisdom in Torah or Treasure of the Temple, and I'll put the links so you guys can go check them out. Shalom.